and welcome to my math tutorials. Today's video is on rounding numbers. We will review basic rounding skills and place value. By the end of this video, hopefully, you should be able to round numbers up into the hundredths place. Let's get started. Let's take a look at the number 1 and 263 thousandths. We're going to be looking at our place values first. The 1 is in the ones place, or the whole. We need to know that sometimes our directions tell us to round to the nearest whole. Anytime they do that, they're always referring to the ones place. Our next place is the tenths place. Then we have the hundredths, and then finally we have the thousandths. In this particular number, we could round to the 1, to the tenths, to the hundredths, but we couldn't round to the thousandths because we don't have a digit afterwards to tell us what to do. So let's look at an example with some instructions. It tells us to round to the nearest tenth. The first thing I want to do is I want to underline the place that they ask me to go to, which is the tenths place. So that would be our 2. The next step is to look next door to the right. It's a 6. We have a quick chart here. If the number that we look to is a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, the number we underlined is going to stay the same. If the number we look next to is 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we are going to round up. In this case, we have a 6, so we're going to round up. It's easy to round 2 up. You just simply add 1, which is 3. So what we're going to do is we're going to make that underline digit 1 more, a 3. Everything to the left stays exactly the same, and everything to the right then becomes a 0. So we have 1 and 300 thousandths. However, when we're rounding decimals, we do not need to keep any extra zeros at the end, so we can get rid of these 2 zeros and make it more simply 1 and 3 tenths. Let's go ahead and look at some times when we do not drop zeros. So, for instance, in the number 4,000, if you were to round a number and get 4,000, you cannot drop these zeros because then you'd only have 4, and that's nowhere near 4,000. Another example when you can't drop zeros is if the 0 is in between some digits. If you got rid of that, it'd make it 29 hundredths, which is a lot different than 209 thousandths. Here's another example of that. Even though we have all these zeros in the 1, we cannot drop all these zeros here. They can only be dropped if they're at the end of a decimal number. Let's look at a problem that might be a little more tricky. Our directions tell us to round to the nearest hundredth. So I'm going to highlight my key word in my directions, hundredth, and I'm going to go ahead and underline the hundredths place, which is this 9 right here. The next thing I'm going to do is look next door. We have a 6, and a 6 says go up. If we go up, we know 1 more up from 9 is 10, but we cannot fit a 10 in one place value. So what we need to do, and my favorite way to do this, is just make it a simple addition problem. Now, we know that everything to the right is going to turn into a 0 anyway, so we do not need to worry about that. We need to add the 1 right under the underlined digit, and then go through the whole process. 9 plus 1 is 10, carry the 1. 9 plus 1 is 10, carry the 1. 8 plus 1 is 9. We always bring our decimal down, and then you bring down the 4. That turns into a 0. Now, as we've said in the past, decimal numbers that have extra zeros you can get rid of. So all the zeros in this case can be left out, and our final answer is 49. It seems a little strange because we're rounding to the nearest hundredth, yet in our answer there's no hundredth. But that's just the way it is sometimes, especially when you have a lot of 9s. You might end up with a number that doesn't even include what they asked you to do in the directions. Let's go ahead and look at one more example before we wrap up. This problem asks us to round to the nearest tenth. Go ahead and highlight that keyword, and I'm going to underline my tens place, which here is a 1. We're going to look next door to the right. The 3 says stay the same. 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 say stay the same. So instead of adding 1, you're just going to leave it alone. It'll just be 1. Everything to the left stays exactly the same, and everything to the right becomes a 0. In this case, we have that extra 0 at the end, and our final answer is 167 and 1/10. Let's go ahead and recap all the steps to rounding. First, we need to make sure we read the directions. So in this case, round to nearest hundredth. We'll highlight that keyword, hundredth. The next step, underline the digit you're rounding. So we'll underline the hundredths place. Third, look to the right. 0 through 4 stay the same, and 5 through 9 round up. In this case, we have a 7, so we're going to round up. When we round the 4 up, it becomes a 5. All the digits to the left stay the same, and all the digits to the right change to zeros. We know that zeros at the end are gone. We end up with 12 and 35 hundredths. Some extra tips for rounding. All zeros are dropped at the end of decimal numbers. Remember, it has to be at the end, and it has to be a decimal number. And if you're rounding a 9, you need to make it an addition problem by adding that 1 to the underlying digit. That will make for an easy way to round those complicated numbers that sometimes give us trouble. Before we go, I'm going to give you a few problems you can practice with. In just a second, the answer is going to come up, so go ahead and pause the video so you can try on your own. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please check back for more later. See you next time.